Reform UK have obviously made a lot, and I mean a lot, about the fact that, their Doge is going to be absolutely fantastic. Oh, sorry, not Doge, Doggle. Because, it's the Department of Local Government Efficiency. So there you go. But to say that they're now all back in action, they're all council meetings now back in full swing. These councils aren't exactly saving money. We had Councillor Condit on too long ago from Warwickshire, and I want to watch one of their recent council meetings soon as well, because they now then when not only are we going to continue with the Tory cuts, but we're also going to cut another like 20 grand or so, but we don't actually know where that money we're going to cut yet is going to come from. Safe to say that once again, Reform UK aren't exactly covering themselves in glory. It's more a continuing case of just pure incompetence, time after time after time. No matter what, that is all we seem to see from them continuously, because that's what they've set themselves up for every single time. Still no policy from them, no concrete policies from them. They're not doing anything. And if they are, they're complaining about stuff that really doesn't matter to people's lives. They're not solving any adult social care problems. They're not solving any send problems for people in the local areas. They're doing nothing. And as I've said before, them doing nothing can just be just as bad as them actually doing something, because them doing nothing means that stuff doesn't get signed off, doesn't even get done. And that's not even talking about the weird and wacky stuff that's been going on in Nottingham. Have they banned the local newspaper? Yes, but apparently not, according to Mick Barton, who then can't even remember what he actually signed off on. But today, of course, we're going to have a look at Durham, because Durham recently has had its own little bit of controversy, because obviously they promised big savings with their Doge unit up there, and instead they've now spent over 13k on complaints about their own councillors. Whoops. Not all going well in Durham at all. So before we do get on into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and of course the subscribe button down below. There is obviously, of course, the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link. We can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the YouTube membership down below as well. So let's crack on then into this, because oh boy, this is once again just goes to show you how bad they really are. So the Reform vowed Doge savings, then, of course, spent 13k on complaints about its own councillors. So, a Reform-led councillor that has now received dozens of complaints about the behaviour of its own party's councillors just 4 months after winning power, with investigations now costing thousands of pounds, the iPaper can reveal. Durham County Council officers received 163 standard complaints since Reform took control of the authority back in May, according now to a Freedom of Information request. At least 153 have been addressed and closed at a cost of over £12,000 in officers' time, the council said. By comparison, there were just 20 formal complaints received by Durham between May and August of 2024. So that's what you would normally get, just 20, but 163 complaints. Anyway, a number of these complaints have all been raised by social media posts by Darren Grimes, the former GB News presenter and, of course, rising star of Reform UK. I wouldn't say so. His star doesn't appear to be that much on the rise, if we're honest, who is now, of course, deputy leader of the council. He has described the complaints, including the allegations of racism, as being politically motivated and wasting the time of police and council officers. Andrea Hopgood, the former Lib Dem leader of Durham, claimed that the council has now had to divert extra staff to deal with the volume of complaints and accused Reform UK of being now concerned with more headlines and clickbait rather than actually running the council. Reform's leader, Andrew Husband, denied any additional staff have been needed and said, in response to this, as with many issues of the council deals that we work with, we seek now to manage determined through existing resources. So, Farage's party, of course, won control of 12 different authorities in England back in May, but promises then were to cut on waste and inefficiency. In local councils, they have now ripped up net zero strategies and, of course, to stop migrant boats crossing the channel. That's not even their responsibility, but there you go. Durham, of course, now the 8th largest authority in England, serving more than 500,000 people in the traditional Labour heartland, was one of the party's most eye-catching victories. But critics now say that Reform is having to confront the reality of running a council that, like many others across the country, is now increasingly in difficult financial positions. Promises of the Doge-style review, named after the Trump administration's own controversial Department of Government Efficiency, tried to identify major savings at Durham, have yet to materialize because, of course, they can't materialize these things. You can't cut any more of these things. Instead, of course, the council leader Husband has now complained that Reform UK now faces having to put up council tax by a minimum of 5% or cut services due to its financial position. And remember, they are also removing the levy that poor people didn't, like low income people in Durham didn't have to pay as much council tax. Now that's gone. So I'm sure a lot of people are suddenly very happy with Reform UK in that area. Durham, of course, currently faces a deficit with £71 million over the next 4 years, and Husband has said that he needs now further funding to more adequately reflect the demands and cost and pressures that we now face. And this is the reality. This is the reality they are now having to confront. Doesn't matter that you say, oh, we're going to be great, we're going to be wonderful. But then whenever it's questioned on any of the stuff, well, what exactly do? How are you going to solve those problems? What's your policy for this? They're now actually having to confront the reality on this, and they cannot hack it. And it is going to go really badly for them. Sooner or later, in one of these councils, something really bad is going to happen. I think a bankruptcy is going to happen. And when we find out how it went down, it is going to be classic Reform UK incompetence. Because which we've seen so far, they don't know any differences on this. And it's just going to be a beautiful disaster to watch unfold. It'll be really bad, of course, for the people living in that area. But hey, a lesson of why you don't put these idiots in charge. But anyway, he continued saying that they've got a vision that is, of course, that there's all this. They had this vision that there's all this wasted money, and that we've had 15 years of austerity. Hopgood said, "If you think that there is any waste left, that is easy accessible, we've already done it." Husband said that Reform still believes there is waste and inefficiency to be found in Durham, and that for its administration, it is not just about savings, but revenue creation. And that's the insane thing as well. Revenue creation. How do you intend to do that? What do you mean? How are you going to go about that? But they still are, of course, banging that drum about waste and inefficiency. Honestly, it's going to be insane. He said, of course, the savings will have to be made as long as there are resources now provided to local government doesn't meet our cost pressures, which is the current case in the County Durham. Hopgood will no doubt be proved incorrect once again. Her administration left this council facing a £1 billion debt. Reform will not let this happen. Durham's, of course, Reform leadership claims it has now already saved money by scrapping net zero policies. It's going to cost Durham in the long run, but there you go. And of course, funding now for the city's Pride Festival. However, opposition parties have now disputed that arguing that net zero investments were always based on extra grant funding that the council would have received from a central government or regional government, which again is also true as well. They've said they saved about 25 million. They haven't. They've stopped us getting 25 million in investment on things like solar panels on our buildings, Hopgood said. Most of the government grants, which are now going to give back, what was, of course, in the budget then for net zero? Nothing. It was completely reliant on the government giving us money and getting grants. Husband said we have now plenty announced in regards to, of course, to net zero. A sneak preview into one example will be the fact that we will now no longer be spending 4.2 million upgrading our fleet to electric vehicles. When Reform UK swept to power back in May, Farage, of course, visited Durham and promised then to axe jobs related to diversity, equality, inclusion, or DEI, to stop council employees then working from home. The party then also vowed to cut back on the number of staff and council on salaries of more than £100,000. But opposition leaders do believe that Reform UK would not even be able to make such dramatic changes in terms and conditions and even salaries without then running into serious legal problems that councillors then need to offer very competitive salaries in the face of much higher pay in the private sector. Some roles we can't just recruit because the private sector pays for so much more. Planners, legal people, it is really hard when we are restricted to what we can pay, Hopgood added. Aside then from the day-to-day running of Durham, Reform has then experienced even some controversies among its 65 councillors. Within a week of taking political office in the authority in May, Councillor Andrew Kilburn was then forced to resign because it emerged he failed to declare that he was already working for the council. Of course, we know about that one. Back in June, Reform Councillor John Bailey then stood down, citing health reasons, sparking another by-election. And then the third, Councillor Paul Bean, currently now suspended over allegations he breached impartiality rules with comments he made on social media about asylum seekers. Because again, he works for the Home Office. Residents, of course, in Sherburn and Picton have also told the paper that it has now been impossible to contact one of their new Reform councillors, Race Beeris, about local issues and has not even been seen in their village since being elected. What a surprise. Has anyone checked that he's still alive? Because, that would be funny if that's happened twice now, that they've elected dead people on their ticket. Burris, who now previously stood as a UKIP candidate back in Bishop Auckland and grew up on a council estate in the West Midlands before his career in law, which saw him serve as magistrate for magistrate in the tourists in Chios Islands, was a resident asked in Sherburn Facebook group how to contact Burris recently. It then set off a flurry of complaints about his alleged lack of response. His name should be the Scarlet Pimpernel, wrote one resident. People say on here that he has never been back to the village even one time since being elected. Another local business owner who asked not to be named told the paper it is impossible to get a hold of him. Burris was then contacted for a comment, which guess what? Probably hasn't responded to. Durham's Reform Administration is, of course, due to start its new council plan at a full meeting in the council in October, and of course, that will be fun to watch. Documents published in recent weeks may suggest that many of its priorities will be very similar to the ones approved by previous administrations back in February. So it's basically just going to go, we're just going to copy. Oh, look, another reform tactic we've been seeing replicated a lot from pretty much every other council recently. So it continues. Reform says, of course, it wants Durham Council to demonstrate things like good governance, value for money, and have a workforce fit for the future, for example. The previous Lib Dem plan said that the council would show effective governance, value for money, and have a workforce fit for the future. Talk about copying your next door neighbour's homework. Anyway, also claims that the residents in Durham will not see any change whatsoever under the reform leadership so far. It's all headlines and clickbait, she said. Husband said, of course, it was strange to suggest that residents in Durham will, of course, not have noticed any difference with the reform. I doubt anyone in Durham really has noticed, but there you go. In reference to Reform's announcement that it would only fly the Union and St. George flags to permanently fly from the council buildings, he also pointed out to Reform's efforts to secure an Article 4 declaration that would mean that properties cannot be turned into houses of multiple occupancy or HMOs without securing planning permission, which I believe was the case for most places. I'm not 100% sure, but maybe that was already in place. I know in Barnsley, and I think surrounding, you have to get planning permission to change it into HMO. I don't know if that was the case in Durham already, but there you go. A number of councils have also implemented there you go. So a number of councils have already implemented this measure in a bid to reduce the number of HMO used to house asylum seekers. Husband also claimed that there have been factual savings on net zero. A care emergency has now been announced. But what does that actually mean in practice? And of course, residents are, of course, loving seeing their communities with colour with our patriotic flags. So you mean all those flags now that are just going to rot on lampposts once it starts raining? Yeah, good luck with that. Grimes, of course, did not respond against him. Last month, he wrote, "I've received yet another formal complaint for racism. My residents, of course, didn't let me to stay quiet. They elected me to speak up for them." Another, of course, in another, he said, apparently saying a political party, quote, deserves to die now requires police intervention. Political opponents saw fit to report this post to the police. What's next? Warrants for arrest for calling them useless. Well, maybe that could be considered, a threat on that one. But I want to know when the next Durham scrutiny meeting is, because that is going to be spicy. That is going to be very, very spicy indeed. So I'm watching out, waiting ready for that one. But as always, let me know what you think about all this, because it's very obvious that that's just, of course, focusing on Durham. And of course, the two key ones to watch at the moment are, of course, Durham and Kent. They're the ones where they're in full control. So if anything goes wrong, it is all on them. Whereas we've seen in Leicestershire, Nottingham, and Warwickshire, they aren't in full control. So if something does go wrong, they will, of course, blame the opposition. But in Durham and Kent, if it all goes wrong for them, it's all on them. There's no one else to blame but them. So we'll see what happens. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you